Commander Veltar pressed his scaled back against the twisted metal wreckage of what used to be a supply transport. His breath came in sharp gasps as another wave of plasma fire lit up the rocky ground around him. The mining world of Kepler 442b had turned into hell, and his coalition forces were dying fast. "Commander, we lost another squad," his communications officer whispered, her voice shaking. The young Zentari's forearms trembled as she clutched her damaged radio equipment. The Fortans broke through Sector 7. "They're pushing us back to the main facility." Veltar looked through his broken scope at the enemy positions on the hills above them. Vorthon war machines moved like giant metal spiders across the landscape, their weapons cutting down anything that moved. His mixed species battalion had been fighting for 6 days straight with no sleep, little food, and almost no ammunition left. The mining facility behind them was supposed to be a simple resource extraction operation. 3 different species working together to pull rare minerals from the planet's crust. It should have been peaceful. But the Vorthon Empire wanted those minerals for themselves, and they didn't care about coalition treaties or interstellar law. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked Captain Rixhan, his second in command. The insectoid officer's compound eyes reflected the orange glow of burning vehicles in the distance. "We can't hold this position much longer." Veltar counted his remaining forces in his head. 200 coalition soldiers when they started. Maybe 60 left alive now, and half of those were wounded. The Vorthons had at least 3 full battalions, plus those spider tanks that could punch through their strongest barriers like paper. His pride as a coalition commander told him to fight to the end. His species, the Aquari, were known for their honor in battle. Surrender was not in their nature. But watching his soldiers die for a hopeless cause wasn't honorable either. He pulled out his emergency transmitter, the one reserved for desperate situations. The device felt heavy in his webbed hands. Using it meant admitting failure. It meant asking for help from outsiders who might not even answer. The coalition had many member species, but most were too far away to help in time, except for one group that had joined recently. The humans. They were new to space travel, barely 50 years since their first faster-than-light ships. Most older species saw them as naive children playing with technology they didn't fully understand. But the humans had offered military assistance to all coalition members. Their message had been simple and direct. "If you need help, call us. We will come." Veltar had laughed when he first heard it. What could a species that had just learned to leave their home planet possibly do against the Vorthon Empire's advanced war machine? Now, with his people dying around him, that offer didn't seem so funny anymore. "All units fall back to the secondary perimeter," he ordered into his comm unit. "Establish defensive positions around the main building. Use whatever cover you can. Find." His soldiers moved like shadows through the smoke and debris. Most of them were barely more than children, volunteers from peaceful worlds who had never seen real combat before this nightmare started. They deserved better than to die on this forgotten rock in space. Veltar activated the emergency transmitter. The small device sent out a coded signal that would reach the nearest coalition relay station, then bounce across the galaxy to anyone listening for distress calls. "This is Commander Veltar of Coalition Mining Operation 77 Alpha." He spoke into the device, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "We are under heavy attack by Vorthon Empire forces on Kepler 442b. Request immediate military assistance. Our position is critical. Coordinates are being transmitted with this message." He paused, swallowing his pride. "We are in significant trouble. Any help would be appreciated." The transmitter went silent. Veltar stared at it for a moment, then clipped it back to his belt. The message would take hours to reach the nearest coalition command post, and even longer for any response. By then, they would probably all be dead. A massive explosion shook the ground as one of the Vorthon spider tanks destroyed their last functioning barrier. His soldiers scattered like leaves in a storm, trying to find new cover as the enemy advanced. Then, his comm unit crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The voice that came through was calm, speaking in heavily accented coalition standard. "Commander Veltar, this is Captain Lee Min-ho of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We received your distress call. Reinforcements are already moving to your location. Estimated arrival in 18 hours. Hold your position. Help is coming. Feltar stared at his comm unit in shock. 18 hours. How were they moving ships that fast? And why did the human captain sound so confident, like rescuing a doomed coalition force was just another day at work? Captain Lee, what is your force? Strength? Veltar asked. The Vorthons have significant advantages in numbers and equipment. There was a pause before the human replied. Don't worry about the Vorthons, Commander. We'll handle them. Just keep your people alive until we get there. Something in the captain's tone made Veltar's scales prickle with unease. It wasn't fear or concern he heard in that voice. It was something else entirely. Something that sounded almost like anticipation. 18 hours later, Feltar watched through his broken scope as strange ships appeared in the sky above Kepler 442b. They didn't look like proper military vessels at all. Instead of sleek warships with obvious weapons, he saw what appeared to be converted cargo haulers, mining ships, and even what looked like civilian transports hastily painted with military markings. Are those really our reinforcements? Captain, Rixhan asked, his compound eyes tracking the descending ships. They look like a scrap dealer's collection. The first ship landed with a loud thump in the valley below their position. Its cargo bay opened, and humans began pouring out like insects from a disturbed nest. But instead of carrying advanced weapons or wearing impressive armor, they seemed to be unloading construction equipment, power tools, and containers full of materials that looked more suitable for building houses than fighting wars. A human female approached their defensive position, moving in a crouch to avoid Vorthon sniper fire. Her combat armor was patched with metal plates that didn't match, and she carried what appeared to be a modified mining tool instead of a proper rifle. Commander Veltar? She called out in accented coalition standard. I'm Lieutenant Park Da-un, your liaison officer. Captain Lee sends his greetings and asks you to pull your people back about 200 meters. We need some working space. Veltar stared at her. Working space? Lieutenant, we're in the middle of a battle zone. The Vorthons have us surrounded with heavy armor and superior firepower. Park nodded cheerfully, as if he had just told her about the weather. Yes, we noticed that. Don't worry, we're going to fix the situation. But first we need to address some infrastructure problems. Infrastructure problems? Your defensive positions are all wrong, Park explained, pulling out a tablet that showed detailed maps of the area. No proper supply lines, inadequate cover, terrible sight lines for return fire. Plus your water access is completely cut off, and you don't have any backup power systems. We need to rebuild everything from scratch. Before Veltar could respond, more humans appeared carrying what looked like surveying equipment. They began measuring distances, taking soil samples, and discussing plans in rapid human language while completely ignoring the occasional plasma blast from Vorthon positions. Are they insane? Whispered his communications officer. They're standing in the open like they're planning a construction project. That's exactly what they appeared to be doing. Within 2 hours, the humans had established a command post that looked more like an engineering office than a military headquarters. Charts and blueprints covered every surface, and humans in work clothes argued over technical specifications, while others operated machines that dug trenches and moved enormous amounts of dirt. Sergeant Kim Tae-ho, a stocky human with calloused hands, found Veltar watching the organized chaos with growing confusion. Commander, we're going to need your people to relocate to the temporary shelters we're building. Construction noise might get pretty loud for the next few days. Days? Sergeant, this is supposed to be a rescue operation, not a building project. Kim looked genuinely puzzled. Sir, you can't have a proper defense without proper infrastructure. We're going to solve your Vorthon problem, but we need to do it right. Half measures just create bigger problems later. Veltar watched as humans continued arriving throughout the day. Each ship brought more personnel, but also more construction equipment, fabrication units, and industrial machinery. They immediately began building structures that seemed to follow no military doctrine he had ever studied. The humans dug tunnels that connected defensive positions in ways that made no tactical sense. They constructed barriers that looked more like abstract art than fortifications. Most puzzling of all, they seemed to be building permanent structures, complete installations that would take months to construct properly. Corporal Choi So-young approached him during the afternoon, carrying a tablet full of engineering diagrams. "Commander, we need to discuss water management and waste disposal for your extended stay." "Extended stay?" "Well, yes," Choi replied, looking at him as if he were being slow to understand something obvious. "You can't just fight a battle and leave. That's how problems keep coming back. We need to establish sustainable systems that will prevent future conflicts in this region." By evening, the humans had transformed the battlefield into something completely unrecognizable. What had been empty, rocky ground now contained a complex network of interconnected positions, supply routes, and facilities that seemed to blend military necessity with civilian infrastructure. The strangest part was that the Vorton attacks had become less frequent and more hesitant. Their spider tanks still held the high ground, but they seemed confused by the rapidly changing landscape below them. "What exactly is your strategy here?" Veltar asked Captain Lee when the human commander finally arrived at the forward command. Post Lee studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. "Simple, Commander. We're making it economically inefficient for the Vorthons to continue their current approach. Tomorrow we'll offer them some alternative options that benefit everyone involved." "Alternative options?" "Well, they want the mining resources, right? But their current method is expensive and creates ongoing security problems. We're going to show them a better way to get what they need while solving your defensive requirements at the same time." Veltar felt his scales prickle with the same unease he had experienced during their first radio contact. The humans weren't just planning to fight the Vorthons. They were planning to completely change the entire situation into something else. Entirely. Something that might be much bigger than anyone had expected. 2 weeks after the humans arrived, Veltar no longer recognized the world around him. What had been a simple mining facility surrounded by rocky wasteland now looked like a small city under construction. Massive machines moved earth and stone, while humans in work clothes directed operations that seemed to follow plans only they understood. "Commander, you need to see this," Captain Rixon said, his voice filled with confusion. He handed Veltar a datapad showing aerial images of their position. "The humans have built 17 new structures in the past 3 days. I can't identify what half of them are supposed to do." Veltar studied the images with growing concern. The humans had constructed what appeared to be processing plants, fabrication centers, and storage facilities that dwarfed the original mining operation. Worse, they were building permanent foundations, the kind meant to last for decades rather than months. "Where are they getting all these materials?" he asked. "That's the strange part," Rixhan replied. "They're making everything on site. Those machines aren't just construction equipment. They're turning raw ore and rock into finished building components. I've never seen anything like it." Major Han Soo-jin approached their observation post, carrying her ever-present tablet filled with diagrams and charts. Her human smile was as bright and unsettling as always. "Good morning, Commander. I wanted to update you on our progress." "Progress toward what, exactly?" Veltar asked. "This was supposed to be a military operation to drive off the Vorthons." "Oh, we're handling that," Han replied, gesturing toward the hills where Vorthon forces had been positioned. "They've pulled back about 15 kilometers. Captain Yoon Ji-hae is negotiating with their commanders about resource-sharing agreements." "Resource-sharing agreements?" "Well, they need the rare minerals from this planet, and we need a stable region for our operations. Instead of fighting over limited resources, we're exploring ways to increase total production while reducing conflict. Everyone wins." Veltar stared at her. "You're negotiating with the enemy?" "Enemy is such a limited concept," Han said, making notes on her tablet. "They're potential business partners who happen to be using inefficient methods to achieve their goals. Colonel Bae Sung-min is showing them some new extraction techniques that will triple their yields while reducing environmental damage." Before Veltar could respond, a series of controlled explosions echoed across the valley. He grabbed his weapon thinking they were under attack, but Han remained completely calm. "Don't worry, that's just Sergeant Oh Dong-wook doing some landscape modification. We're clearing space for the new transportation hub." Transportation hub? We can't run efficient operations without proper logistics, Han explained as if talking to a child. Ships need landing facilities, cargo needs processing centers, and personnel need housing. Basic infrastructure requirements. Veltar watched. Human workers directing massive earth-moving equipment that carved new roads through solid rock. In the distance, prefabricated buildings rose from the ground like mushrooms after rain. The scale of construction was enormous, far beyond anything needed for a temporary military operation. How many more humans are coming? He asked. Han consulted her tablet. Admiral Zhang Hierin arrives tomorrow with the logistics fleet. After that, we'll have the specialist teams for agriculture, manufacturing, and cultural integration. Cultural integration? You can't have a stable region without addressing social factors, Han replied matter-of-factly. Dr. Shin Yunji is our xenosociologist. She's developing programs to help different species work together more effectively. Very important for long-term success. That evening, Veltar climbed to the highest observation tower the humans had built, trying to understand what was happening to his world. The view below defied comprehension. Lights stretched across the valley in organized patterns, marking roads, buildings, and work sites that hummed with constant activity. Human workers labored alongside machines that seemed to operate by themselves. Conveyor systems moved materials between facilities in complex networks that reminded him of blood vessels in a living organism. The entire operation pulsed with coordinated energy that never stopped. Impressive, isn't it? Veltar turned to find Lieutenant Park Da-un joining him on the observation platform. She carried a steaming cup of what smelled like human coffee. "What are you people doing?" he asked. "This has gone far beyond any military operation I've ever heard of." Park sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "We're solving problems, Commander. All of them. It's more efficient that way." But the original problem was just the Vorthan attack. That was a symptom, not the real problem, Park explained. The real problem was resource scarcity, lack of infrastructure, poor communication between species, and unstable political arrangements. Fighting the Vorthons would have just postponed those issues, not eliminated them. "So you decided to rebuild an entire star system instead?" "We decided to fix everything that was broken," Park corrected. "If you're going to invest time and resources in a solution, you might as well make it permanent." Below them, night shift workers continued their projects under brilliant artificial lights. The sound of construction mixed with the hum of machinery and the distant voices of humans coordinating complex operations in their rapid, efficient language. "The Vorthons aren't attacking anymore," Veltar observed. "Why would they?" Park asked. "We're offering them better terms than they could get through conquest. Plus, they're curious about our manufacturing techniques. Turns out they're quite good at precision engineering when you give them the right tools and training." Veltar felt a cold realization settling in his stomach. The humans hadn't just responded to his call for help. They had used it as an excuse to establish something much larger and more permanent than anyone had imagined possible. 1 month after calling for human reinforcements, Veltar stood in what used to be his command bunker, but was now labeled as Temporary Administrative Facility 7B. Through the reinforced windows, he watched the largest human fleet he had ever seen descending from orbit like a metal storm cloud. Admiral Zhang Hierin's flagship was 3 times larger than any coalition vessel Veltar had seen, but it wasn't built for war. Its hull was covered with docking bays, cargo holds, and what appeared to be entire manufacturing plants attached to the ship's exterior. The other 36 ships in her fleet looked more like floating cities than military vessels. "Commander, Veltar," Director Imnari said as she entered his office without knocking. The human woman wore civilian clothes and carried a briefcase full of documents that seemed to multiply every time he saw her. "We need to discuss the legal status of this facility." "Legal status?" "Well, you originally called for military assistance on coalition territory," Im explained, spreading papers across his desk. "But the situation has evolved into something more complex. We've established permanent infrastructure, negotiated independent treaties with local populations, and created economic relationships that extend beyond the original mining operation." Veltar picked up one of the documents and tried to read it. The legal language was so complicated that his translator device gave up and simply displayed question marks. What are you saying? We're saying this isn't just a coalition mining facility anymore, Im replied cheerfully. It's become an interspecies economic development zone with shared governance between multiple interested parties. Through the window, Veltar watched human engineers working alongside Vorthon technicians to install what appeared to be a massive communications array. The two species that had been shooting at each other just weeks ago now collaborated so smoothly that they seemed to share the same thoughts. How did the Vorthons become partners instead of enemies? Economics, Im said, as if that explained everything. Sergeant Oh Dong-wook taught their engineers some fascinating construction techniques. Once they realized they could get better results through cooperation than conquest, the whole conflict became irrelevant. A soft chime indicated someone at the door. Captain Lee Min-ho entered, followed by 3 humans Veltar didn't recognize, and 2 Vorthans in what appeared to be diplomatic uniforms. Commander, I'd like you to meet Ambassador Korthal and Engineer Vexthon from the Vorthon delegation, Lee said. They're here to formalize the new partnership agreements. Ambassador Korthal, a tall Vorthon with ceremonial battle scars across, his face bowed respectfully to Veltar. Commander, we apologize for the earlier misunderstanding. Our approach to resource acquisition was inefficient and created unnecessary conflict. Misunderstanding? Veltar repeated weakly. The humans have shown us better methods, Engineer Vexthon added, his mechanical voice filled with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. Their industrial processes are remarkable. We can extract 3 times more minerals while using half the energy and creating no environmental damage. Im spread out a new set of documents. Which brings us to the governance. Question. We have coalition representatives, Vorthon delegates, human administrators, and local planetary populations, all with legitimate interests in this region. We need a formal structure that recognizes everyone's rights and responsibilities. Local. Planetary populations? Veltar asked. This planet was uninhabited. Not anymore, Lee replied. Dr. Shin Yunji's cultural integration program has been very successful. We now have permanent residents from 7 different species, plus the research teams, manufacturing specialists, and agricultural consultants who've decided to stay long-term. Through the window, Veltar could see new residential areas being constructed with architectural styles he didn't recognize. Gardens and parks were laid out between industrial facilities, and what appeared to be schools and recreational centers were rising from the ground like flowers after rain. You've built a city, he said, the reality finally hitting him. We've built the foundation for a regional capital, Admiral Jang corrected as she entered the office. The human admiral was shorter than Veltar had expected, but she carried herself with an authority that made the room feel smaller. Commander, thank you for bringing this opportunity to our attention. Opportunity? Your distress call identified a critical gap in interspecies cooperation and regional development, Jang explained, reviewing a holographic display that showed the entire star system. The mining operation was just the beginning. This region has the potential to become a major hub for trade, research, and diplomatic cooperation between species that have never worked together before. Veltar looked at the hologram and felt dizzy. The display showed not just Kepler 442b, but planned developments on 3 other planets in the system, plus space stations, shipping routes, and what appeared to be the beginnings of a small fleet. Academy. We're establishing the first joint interspecies university, Im added helpfully. Students from across the galaxy will come here to study cooperative engineering, xenobiology, and multicultural diplomacy. I just wanted you to drive off the Vorthons, Veltar said quietly. Mission accomplished, Lee replied with a human smile. They're now our business partners and co-developers, much more efficient than driving them away. Ambassador Korthal nodded agreement. The human approach to problem-solving is most impressive. Instead of fighting over limited resources, they showed us how to create unlimited resources through better cooperation. Veltar sank into his chair, which he noticed had been replaced with a more comfortable model without him knowing when it happened. Outside, the sound of construction continued day and night. as humans and their new partners built something that had never existed before in the galaxy. He had called for simple military help and somehow triggered the creation of an entirely new form of civilization. 6 months after his desperate call for help, Veltar sat behind a polished metal desk in an office that belonged in a diplomatic embassy rather than a military outpost. The nameplate on his door read, Commander Veltar, Director of Interspecies Coordination in 7 different languages, including several he couldn't pronounce. Through his window, he watched the morning shift change in what everyone now called New Harmony City. Human children walked to school alongside young Vorthons, their laughter mixing with the chittering sounds of Zentari younglings and the musical calls of Aquari tadpoles. The sight should have been impossible. 6 months ago, half these species had been shooting at each other. Commander, the quarterly reports are ready, Dr. Shin Yunji announced as she entered his office. The human xenosociologist carried a stack of data pads that seemed to grow thicker every month. The numbers are quite remarkable. Veltar accepted the first pad and scrolled through statistics that still seemed like fiction. Crime rates in the Izygome, New Harmony sector had dropped to practically zero. Economic productivity had increased by 800% compared to the original mining operation. Trade volume between previously hostile species had grown beyond anything in recorded galactic history. How is this possible, he asked, not for the first time. We eliminated the causes of conflict instead of just treating the symptoms, Shin explained, settling into the chair across from his desk. When people have enough resources, meaningful work, and reasons to cooperate instead of compete, violence becomes unnecessary. The second datapad showed population growth figures that made Veltar's head spin. New Harmony City now housed over 200,000 permanent residents from 19 different species. The waiting list for immigration permits was longer than some planets' total populations. People want to live here because it works, Shin continued. We've proven that different species can not only coexist but actually thrive together when you design systems that benefit everyone. A soft chime announced another visitor. Captain Lee Min-ho entered, now wearing the uniform of a galactic development coordinator rather than military gear. Behind him walked Ambassador Korthal and 3 other officials Veltar had learned to recognize as the Regional Council. Commander, we need to discuss the expansion proposals, Lee said, activating a holographic display that filled half the office. 17 other star systems have formally requested to join the New Harmony development model. The hologram showed trade routes, communication networks, and planned settlements stretching across a significant portion of the galaxy. What had started as a simple mining operation was becoming something that resembled a new form of civilization. The Galactic Coalition Council wants to establish New Harmony as an official prototype for peaceful interspecies cooperation, Ambassador Korthal added. Our success here has attracted attention from the highest levels of government. Veltar studied the expansion plans with a mixture of amazement and growing unease. You're talking about changing how the entire galaxy operates. We're talking about fixing problems that have caused wars for thousands of years, Lee replied. The old system of separate species competing for limited resources doesn't work. We've proven there's a better way. Dr. Shin pulled up another display, showing comparative data from across known space. Traditional interspecies conflicts cost an average of 2.7 million lives and 15 trillion credits per incident. Our cooperative model eliminates both the human cost and the economic waste. Plus, it's more fun, added a new voice from the doorway. Sergeant Oh Dong-wook entered carrying a small alien child who was giggling at something he had said. Commander, little Zixana here wanted to show you her school project. The young Vorthon held up a drawing that showed humans, Vorthons, Aquari, and several other species working together to build what appeared to be a spaceship. At the bottom, written in carefully practiced coalition standard, were the words, My family's new home. Veltar accepted the drawing with hands that trembled slightly. The child's innocent artwork represented something that political theorists had claimed was impossible for centuries. She had grown up seeing cooperation between species as completely normal. We're not just changing politics and economics, he realized aloud. You're changing how entire generations think about the universe. That's the most important part, Shin agreed. These children will grow up expecting different species to work together. They'll build relationships and solve problems in ways that previous generations couldn't imagine. Through the window, Veltar watched the afternoon shift beginning their work. Humans and Vorthons collaborated on engineering projects. Aquari and Zentari managed agricultural systems together. Species that had never even met before the humans arrived now worked as integrated teams on projects that benefited everyone. I called for military reinforcements to help me win a small battle, Veltar said quietly. Instead, you eliminated the concept of that type of warfare from an entire region of space. We solved the real problem, Lee replied simply. War happens when people fight over things they think are scarce. We made abundance possible instead of scarcity. Veltar looked down at the child's drawing again. In her innocent picture, the spaceship was flying toward a star labeled Tomorrow in multiple languages. She had drawn it large and bright as if the future itself was something wonderful to explore together. He had asked for help to survive one desperate day. The humans had given him a completely different kind of future, one where desperate days like that might never happen again. Outside his window, the impossible city continued to grow, filled with the sounds of construction, laughter, and dreams, being built into reality by hands from across the galaxy, working side by side.